Tiffany, and today I wanted to do something special and talk about some of my favorite short books. I know sometimes you are just in the mood for something that's short or something that's going to be impactful and powerful, and there is something about short novels that I feel really sticks with me, and maybe it's because the language is so sparse and I feel like everything that's in the story is meant to be there for a reason, and everything is intentional, and everything in there is meant for you to pick up on and will come factor into the story later. And that is just one of my favorite aspects of my reading experiences with short novels. So I wanted to share with you my 10 favorite short novels. All of these are under 200 pages. That was the parameter I put for this video. So these are books that technically could be read in a sitting. I don't recommend that for all of these. Some of these are short story collections, and I recommend maybe taking one story at a time and letting it sit with you for a bit, but I'm not going to tell you how to read your books, so you do you. Now, if you know me, you might assume, because of the way it's going to start out, that a lot of these are going to be horror novels. They are not all going to be horror novels. I tried to diversify it a little bit, not just in authorship and characters, but in genre as well, as you'll see. So I promise these are not all horror novels. I am thinking of someday doing a separate video of 10 short horror novels to read. So I would say this is like horror, literary fiction, and like 2 short story collections. So within those genres. So the first book I wanted to talk about is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and both of Shirley Jackson's major works come in at under 200 pages. So We Have Always Lived in the Castle and The Haunting of Hill House. I want to talk about We Have Always Lived in the Castle because the narrator of that book has just stayed with me. Maricat Blackwood is just such an odd duck. We are hearing, when you read it, it's in first person perspective. From her perspective, she is narrating the story of her and her sister living in this decrepit mansion and just not knowing what to make of them, and they are basically the outcasts in this town because their family died mysteriously a few years ago, and the townspeople don't know quite what to make of them. And I think you, as you are reading it, also don't quite know what to make of Maricat because she is very strange. And she has this infantile voice. Even though she makes it a point to say that she's 18, she just acts very childish. And it is just such a great and atmospheric reading experience. Shirley Jackson is amazing. So I definitely recommend, if you haven't picked it up already, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. The next book I want to talk about was also my favorite book of 2017, and this is Julian Barnes' Sense of an Ending. This is about a man in his middle age who comes into contact with somebody from his youth, and the presence of this person has forced him to look back on events of his life and really consider if the way he remembers things happening is how things actually happened, and kind of coming to terms that he is kind of the unreliable narrator of his own life, and just becoming obsessed with this particular event in his past and looking at it from all of these different angles. And this story haunted me. So after I finished, I had messaged a person that had also read it, and we went back and forth and had different theories, and we're also parsing out little details in the story. So it's like we had become obsessed with this event along with the main character of the story, and I thought that was great. And this is a book that the minute you finish it, you'll want to reread it. So this is a book I 100% am so excited to reread. The next book I want to talk about is The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This is a story told in these very small page and a half vignettes of this small girl living on Mango Street, which is a poor part of Chicago, and about growing up in her dreams. And the little vignettes are just little snippets and little aspects of her life, but they are very powerful and poetic, especially when you consider the age of the narrator and how she is seeing things and how her environment is affecting her. I absolutely love this book and 100% recommend it. It is tiny. I think it's the shortest book that I am recommending here. Actually, take that back. Not the shortest book I'm recommending here, but it comes in at 110 pages, and there's a lot of room. So this one is just very readable. I think this is considered technically like YA/middle grade, so very, very readable for it being more poetic. The next book I want to talk about is Last Night at the Lobster by Stewart O'Nan, and this is just a slice of life novel. We are just coming in the middle of the action, and it is about this Red Lobster in Connecticut during a snowstorm, and these employees are working their very last shift at this Red Lobster because they're closing it down, and half of the crew is getting moved to like an Applebee's down the road. So it's just about everything that happens during this shift. If you've ever worked in food service, if you've ever been a waitress or a hostess or a server, or anything like that, this is just such a fun book because it is just a snapshot of these people just trying to make it through their one last shift at work. And there's this snowstorm and all of the little events that happen and the power dynamics within the restaurant and the little relationships within the story in the restaurant. It was just so fantastic. I want to pick up more stories like this that are just, you know, a snapshot, just one day in the life of, you know, this group of people. It was so great, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. This was another book that was recommended to me by Liz Schubert, and she gives me like fantastic recommendations. The next book I want to talk about is Barefoot Dogs by Antonio Ruiz-Camacho, and this is a collection of short stories about a wealthy Mexican family, and the patriarch of this Mexican family is kidnapped. And so the story jumps around in time because it is a short story collection. So we are jumping different point of views, different points in time, but basically how the event of this patriarch's kidnapping affects people within the story and how their life was before the kidnapping and after, and how they had to go into hiding and go into exile, and just the sense of hopelessness that comes with that situation and all the consequences from that. And certain family secrets are uncovered, and how just everyone is dealing and grieving with all of this, and whether or not they are ever going to get to know what happened to him. So I thought it was just very nuanced and very well told, and I think an underrated Latin American work if you're looking for one. So that is Barefoot Dogs by Antonio Ruiz-Camacho. Okay, this next book is actually the shortest book on this list, and this is The Grownup by Gillian Flynn, which could be a thriller, it could be horror, just really depending how you look at it. It is 60 pages. So it is, I would say, just kind of a longer short story more than a novella. I don't know what the parameters are there. Because it's so short, I really can't give too much away other than to say that this is about a woman who had a questionable profession in a massage parlor and is looking for a new job. She comes in contact with what might be a ghost story. It's a book you just have to read and have to experience. The writing is great. I would say that the story is a little divisive, it's a little polarizing, so I fall into the camp that I really enjoyed it. And it's 60 pages, so it's not like you wasted a lot of time into it if you absolutely hate it. But I love everything Gillian Flynn does, just like without a doubt. So that is The Grownup by Gillian Flynn. The next book I want to talk about is Our Souls at Night by Kent Haruf. And I read this for my book club and just fell in love with this beautiful story of these, you know, two beautiful souls coming together. So this takes place in a small town in Colorado, and there is a widow and a widower, and they are, you know, older. They've obviously survived their partners, and it starts out when the widow knocks on the widower's door with a bit of a strange proposition. She tells him that, you know, since her husband has died, the hardest part about moving on has been nighttime and sleeping, and that she really just misses having like a person next to her while she's sleeping. So she asks this widower if he will just agree to just platonic, it's a platonic relationship, if he will just agree to sleep in the same bed with her, just because she misses just having someone there and she feels really lonely. And it's about these two lonely souls coming together in just this beautiful story that just like brought tears to my eyes. It was just so beautiful. I haven't seen the Netflix adaptation with Jane Fonda yet, but I totally recommend this book. I need to read more Kent Haruf because he just told this story just amazingly. It was just a gorgeous story about these people. This was a story I was really iffy about going in because I didn't know a lot about it. It was one of those book club books that I felt like I had to read, but I was so glad that I read it when I was done. So that is Our Souls at Night by Kent Haruf. The next book I want to recommend is Gloria Naylor's The Women of Brewster Place. This is a bit of a short story collection, but it takes place in a building called Brewster Place, and the story is told from the perspective of different women that live in this building. Obviously, they're different backgrounds, they're different experiences and heartbreaks that they're bringing into the story. And I just felt like I really got to know these women. And I think I fell in love with Gloria Naylor as an author, and I just want to read everything she's ever written. So this is The Women of Brewster Place, and she has another collection called The Men of Brewster Place. And I cannot wait to check that out because I absolutely loved this. So this was The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria Naylor. Another one of my favorite books ever has to be Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And if you haven't read this, you need to get on this like immediately. This is a masterpiece. Another book I read for my book club, and I was so glad that I did. Janie has to be one of my favorite characters just of all time. This takes place in Florida, and it follows Janie, who is coming back into town after the death of her partner, and she is relaying the story of everything that has happened to one of her friends. And just the story of Janie's life is so crazy, and she is just such a charismatic character. And the language in here that Zora Neale Hurston uses is just beautiful. This I think might be one of my favorite books ever. So this is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. The last book I want to talk about is Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. This is about a woman who realizes that she has the power to transfer the emotions she is feeling into the food that she makes. And so when people eat the food and consume what she's made while she's overwhelmed with that emotion, they will also feel that emotion. So it's about how she uses that power in different ways, whether she means to or not, and the consequences of that, and a few possible love triangles. Listen. This book is not without its problems. I have certain problems with this book, mainly that the main love interest is trash. But this is a beautiful story, and the way that Esquivel starts each chapter is, this is like a recipe book, and you start out and it starts out with like this recipe for this occasion, like use this many potatoes and like this much meat. And then it just seamlessly transitions into a narrative, into a chapter for that story. And I don't know how she does it, but it is so great and amazing. And I wish there was more classic works of Mexican fiction. Unfortunately, there is not. So this is, I think, one of the more famous books from Mexico, and it is a very enjoyable, very quick read. So this is Laura Esquivel's Like Water for Chocolate. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Those are my 10 favorite short novels under 200 pages. Let me know if you have any thoughts on the books that I mentioned, or if you have another book you would like to tell me about that was your favorite that's under 200 pages. I would love to hear about it, so talk to me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!